Let me talk to you, please. Thanks. I want to elaborate on something I mentioned in my talk at the Vegan Futures Festival a couple of weeks ago, and people came up to me afterwards and said, "Are you sure that's right? I've never heard of that before." And this is the fact that the human brain has been shrinking for the past 200,000 years, and not slowly either. We've lost a tennis ball's worth of brain matter in the past 30,000 years. Scientists aren't that interested, seemingly. They're like, well, we're obviously not becoming stupider, so maybe the brain's just getting more efficient. Okay. Tony Wright has a theory that explains why this has been happening, and it's one that he's talking about in Todd Morden on December the 4th, and I hope to go along to that event and get some footage from the talk, and I hope to post more about the actual theory that's largely based on the change in our ancestors' diets after they left the jungle. But it'd be good to get it in his words, otherwise I'm just paraphrasing. But this is the most important issue facing humanity today, I think, because if we face up to the fact that we might have an impaired ability to perceive reality clearly, we can finally admit that our idea of progress may be the opposite. We can confront the fact, and as a fact many people are aware of, that as civilization advances, it becomes less and less hospitable to humans. We just seem to move forward without much forethought. What is technology doing to our behavior and doing to our brains? What is processed food doing to our bodies? What's pornography doing to our relationships? What is the wireless world doing to us on a cellular level? We all know these are issues that threaten the continuation of the species. There are people looking into these things, but not many. I mean, even from that kind of thing, it seems to me that our sense of urgency is somewhat on the blink. We know conceptually something's going on, we got to pay attention, and yet we can't feel that call to action emotionally, really. Tony likens our situation to a dementia patient trying to self-diagnose. You somehow have to realize your own delusion and put measures in place to override your faulty behavior. This is why I think people find it hard to go vegan, because a lot of people want to and agree with it, but just find in practice they can't. I think it's because our capacity for empathy is dwindling. Empathy is about imagination, the ability to imagine what it's like for animals and for other people. And as our shrinking brain loses that capacity, our perception of the bigger picture beyond ourselves is closing in. Because we can't empathize even with our children and what we're doing to their world. I mean, we know intellectually what we're doing. We just can't feel it somehow. And currently it's like we don't even care about our future selves. We're engaged in behaviors that will harm them. And we're not worried. And the reason I think the younger generation has been able to take up veganism in the numbers they have is because the internet provides these pictures that the imagination fails to. Once we perceive them, we act accordingly. But it's a failing of imagination that's been holding us back all this time, because we know what goes on in slaughterhouses. Somehow, though, we just can't imagine it with any emotional immediacy. Empathy along with creativity is one of the things that apparently makes us human, but Tony Wright's research suggests that our brain is in the process of reverting to a standard mammalian model, and that's certainly what it looks like physically. And mammals have, far less intelligence and far less empathy, and so increasingly we're acting like, the other animals, just out of fear. We want to protect, we scaremonger, we seek to destroy other ways of life, we fiercely protect ourselves and think fuck everyone else. And then some people would say, what about art? What about science? What about the religious impulse? These have bloomed since the time of us leaving the jungle. So, the brain can't have been shrinking. Well, in future videos, if you're interested, subscribe for those. I want to suggest these are also signs that we're losing it, because I think these things are the best things we have as a species, but they could be poor imitations of capabilities we had mentally before we started having to do things like externalize art and so on. But I'll go into that some other time. Our empathy is so profoundly stunted at the moment that we are literally living off our children, and that is one of the clearest signs of a malfunctioning species you can get. I mean, at one point you could say it's quite abstract, and that's why we don't act with any urgency, because we just think, oh, at some point in the future we're going to have a problem. But no, it's very real and immediate. In Britain, young people are being enslaved. They're being expected to work for free for at least a year. I mean, what the hell's that about? They're not even being asked to make do with low pay. They're working for free. It's very weird what's going on there. And if they want higher education at the moment, they're having to pay for it themselves. They're having to borrow from their future selves. So it seems like we've lost our parenting instinct, because the natural urge to hand down wealth and knowledge to your children is gone. And I'm not a socialist, but surely capitalists would agree. If you want a productive workforce, it's a good idea to provide things like good healthcare and good education. The best companies do this kind of thing. And, you know, Google, for instance, seems to provide everything. I was at their place in London. They have an amazing canteen. It's totally free, really healthy food, because it makes sense. You want productivity, then you just look after the community you've got. But the problem of not doing that is that the people who get ahead, the families who can afford education and healthcare and so on, are very likely to be those in the business of destroying the planet, because that's how you do well right now. So future generations, the successful amongst them, will be in that family business of destroying the planet. When I look at how we are employing our technological abilities, I really can't tell if it's greed or profound stupidity that's driving it forward. Truly, we are a species who are physically capable and mentally incapable. One of the stupidest things we do, in my opinion, is seek to stimulate our brain's pleasure centers as though the meaning of life is pleasure. So we get that through connectivity, addictive food, sexual excitement, false rewards. But we don't realize the reward centers in the brain are there to try and get us to behave in ways that we need to give us a sense of well-being, to behave in things that are crucial to our survival, like consumption of healthy nutrition, like sex, like love and support within communities. Like one of the things they reward us for is empathy. You know, empathy for animals means we don't eat the wrong foods. And you start eating animals, you get heart disease, atherosclerosis, you know, increase in cancers, dementia, that kind of thing. Empathy with other people is crucial to the survival of the species. Like, you know, you feel pride in your children, you identify with your partners. If they hurt, you do. Some days when I head into central London and look around me, I think this is all in the past. I mean, who is now working for a genuine communal purpose? So many people put up with shitty jobs because they've been sold the idea the point of life is to get ahead. That's what it's about. As though you can find happiness all on your own, because it's just about your own brain's pleasure centers and looking after your little family unit, or looking after your small group of friends, and everyone else can fuck off. And it's truly bizarre how many people are becoming completely insular. I mean, people tell me their partners prefer porn to sex. I mean, then you know you got a problem. It's as though pleasure has become our primary concern. And if you have the capacity to do that, to get pleasure without engaging in crucial behaviors, you're screwed. And that's why we feel depressed and broken and lonely. We're not doing the things that give us a sense of well-being. And why would we? If you got the key to the prize cabinet, what's the point in running the race at all? Perhaps that's why a lot of people feel they don't have a sense of purpose. Where we need to focus is in the realm of emotion. This is the right-brained realm that Tony Wright says we're losing a grip on. Complex emotions define us as human, and it's emotion and not thought that tells you what love is, for example. I mean, we put a lot of emphasis on the intellectual landscape, but it is emotions that tell you what reality is. Emotions will give you your sense of mortality. Emotions give you a sense of what fear and what joy is. The intellect can only adumbrate, photocopy, conceptualize, but it doesn't give you that immediacy. That world is being severely neglected, and this is also predicted by Tony Wright's theory of a more left-brained style, society. Now, We have to get the world back onto plant-based nutrition because, as I hope you'll research for yourself, Tony Wright's theory on the shrinking human brain indicates that a diet of refined grains and meat is the cause of our accelerating insanity. When it comes to starches and grains and things, you can suppose these are quite neutral foods because the most successful cultures in recent times have lived on those things as a staple. Their contribution to the shrinking brain is simply that they're not as good as our original fruit-based diet, but they don't seem to be causing us even more harm. Fruit caused the brain to balloon in size in the first place, so reducing our intake of that halted that growth. And then meat, which is linked to dementia and atherosclerosis of the brain, a reduction in oxygen levels, things like that. You can suppose that meat is going to accelerate the brain damage or the brain shrinkage faster, because indeed it appears to do that quite commonly over a person's lifetime alone, atherosclerosis, dementia, that kind of thing. When you look at our behavior en masse, yes, we can fight it culturally, but if we continue losing a grip on reality physically, the fight is going to be harder and harder because people just won't know what the hell we're on about. They won't have that emotional complexity. And when it comes to progress, you can see where it's going. People think progress is about being independent from nature. They don't seem to understand we have to fit in with nature. There's a tendency towards getting away from the need for interdependence with others, for relationships, because those things are unpredictable and it's all just about personal pleasure, isn't it? This in the face of an epidemic of depression and anxiety and fear, because life's about engaging and feeling the presence of other people. It's not about fencing off and hemming in and fearing and shutting down. The whole thing is an inability to see beyond ourselves, an inability to create pictures of what we can't see. Like, we don't seem to think that war is happening unless we got the news switched on or unless it's on social media. And of course, there's the slaughter of innocent creatures that can't possibly be real or valid if it's not pain that we can feel ourselves. People who go vegan feel like they're having a spiritual awakening sometimes. I felt like that, a greater sense of connectivity, and that's probably why religions and spiritual practices involve giving up meat or fasting, abstaining from the stuff that hinders your full awareness. It's just a functioning brain. It's just realizing you're part of a bigger story and not the story in its entirety. More on this in future videos. I'll link to Tony Wright's work below because it's such a far-reaching and fascinating theory. And one thing's for sure, our job is to get this out there. I think this is the most important area of study there can be at the moment because it underwrites everything else we do. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.